Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Be Like Christ. Welcome to our Bible study in the book of Proverbs. We are in Proverbs chapter 8 today. It seems like our study is going very quickly. We're already 8 chapters in and almost done with our first section of the book. If you would like the PDF for this study, you can download it at tobelikechrist.com. It's an outline of all the key information. And if you haven't studied chapter 7, I'd encourage you to do that one first. And we also have a PDF for that one because there's some tie-in between chapter 7 and chapter 8. Up first on our PDF is our outline of the book of Proverbs, our sections here, and we are in chapter 8 today, which falls into the first section, which is the way of wisdom versus the way of folly, or lady wisdom versus lady folly, as we'll kind of see today. The second section, the Proverbs of Solomon, and then at the end of the book, we'll talk about the Proverbs of Augur and Lemuel. Key themes for today, we see lady wisdom offering to turn fools into wise men. And our second theme, wisdom originates with God and existed with him before the world was created. And we have just one word in our definition section today, and that is the word prudence in verse 5. Prudent, or being prudent, is acting carefully, moving through life cautiously and thoughtfully. All right, this brings us to page number 2, to our outline section. Let's break this chapter down and understand what we just read. I've got our 36 verses broken down into 3 sections. The first one is verses 1 through 21, Lady Wisdom's Invitation. After speaking about the adulterous woman, or the forbidden woman, in chapter 7, Solomon contrasts her with another woman in Proverbs 8. We once again see Solomon personifying the virtue of wisdom as a woman who's standing in her city, inviting men to leave their foolishness behind and to embrace what she has to share with them. Lady Wisdom stands in public places, like at the gate of the city, crying out, quote, "O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips." And I don't have all of this on the outline, but I want you to contrast the woman who we saw in the last chapter with the woman that we see here. Lady Wisdom does her business in public. She stands in very public places in the middle of the day, like the gate of the city, one of the most trafficked places in the whole town. So she's out in public. That's versus the forbidden adulterous woman who does her work at twilight or during the night, as we saw in the last chapter. Lady Wisdom, what comes off of her lips? Truth, virtue, righteousness. And people hear her words and they recognize these are good and right things. How are the lips of the forbidden woman described in chapter 7 and in Proverbs 5, verse 3? She has lips like honey, but they're destructive. They're honey in that they're sweet, they're seductive, they're tempting, right? But what comes out of her mouth is not the truth and the righteousness of Lady Wisdom, but it's this deception, this lie that ultimately is going to destroy men. So she's luring people in, but the end result of that is that they're going to be ruined. The forbidden, the adulterous woman tempts, entices men into something that ultimately will take them further away from God. Lady Wisdom here is inviting people to draw closer to God because God is the source of all wisdom. Lady Wisdom leads men into the way of righteousness, which is something that gold can't buy. She talks about her wisdom being worth more than gold or silver or jewels. Wisdom causes a man to hate evil, just like God hates evil, so he becomes more and more like his creator. Wisdom allows kings to rule with virtue and with justice. But at the same time, wisdom is not just reserved for the elite of the earth, like the kings and the princes. Lady Wisdom is discoverable to anyone who desires her. She says, quote, "I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently will find me." That is section number 1 through verse 21. Now, as we get into 22 through 31, we're going to talk about our second section, which is titled Wisdom, a Timeless Virtue Flowing from Eternity. Real wisdom comes from God, the Creator, and Lady Wisdom makes this clear in verses 22 through 21 or 31 when she describes wisdom being present with God before the world existed. So wisdom predates the existence of our world. She proclaims, quote, "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work. The first of his acts of old, ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginnings of the earth." Verse 22 and 23. She says that she was at the master workman's side, that's God. She was at the master workman's side before the oceans were formed, before the rivers were flowing, before the mountains were shaped, before there was dust on the earth, before the skies were created, or before the foundations of the earth were marked out. So what we learn from this is that wisdom is not some kind of philosophical invention of man, but it actually flows from God, from the eternal, and it leads us back to God, back to the eternal. In our last section today, verses 32 through 36, we see Lady Wisdom's final encouragement. So Proverbs 8 concludes with Lady Wisdom encouraging people not to neglect her instructions and not to pass her by at the gate of the city and say, I'm not interested in what that lady is offering me. You'll run into the forbidden woman and have trouble with the adulterous woman if that's the attitude you have towards Lady Wisdom. She says this, quote, "For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord, but he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death." And every day, Lady Wisdom encourages us to embrace her wisdom, which is why she is at the bottom of our outline on page number 2 every day, across from our contemplative man on page number 1. Let's go ahead now and talk about our application for today. I believe that there is wisdom in reading books that were written by men. In fact, I was just listening to a lecture the other day from somebody who doesn't necessarily share all my beliefs, but he presented a text in a way I'd never heard before, and it opened my mind to a different perspective of looking at something in a different way, and I made a connection I had never made before. So I don't want to give you the impression that I say you should never read books by men that are written by men, but think about it. If the Bible really is what it says it is, a book that's inspired by this master workman, by the Lord, then we need to consider it to be an infinitely greater source of wisdom than any human writing. And I think this should be reflected in our reading and our studying time in the way that it breaks down. I would encourage you, and I think that I would have God's affirmation on this as well, to spend significantly more time reading the Bible than you spend in all of your other reading combined. The reason for this is because the Bible was written by, inspired by, the source and origin of wisdom. All other authors are just secondary sources. No other author has as much to offer you. And that's by a long shot if the claims of the Bible's inspiration are true. And of course, we believe that they are. So that is our Bible study in Proverbs chapter 8 today. Hopefully I wasn't too far over 5 minutes. Felt a little long-winded today. I can never actually know until I edit these things, but might have been a little long today. Anyway, Lord willing, we'll be back tomorrow to talk about chapter 9, which, remember, is the conclusion of our first section of Proverbs, and then we will launch into the Proverbs of Solomon in chapters 10 through 29. So I'm excited about that. Hopefully you'll join me tomorrow to finish up section number 1.